Yeah, I'd like to thank Brian as well as Maryanne for inviting me to join this wonderful conference. I would like to move to the other side of the Mediterranean today and start with a poem. So time for some poetry. From 1569, Ode to Danube, by the Ottoman courtier, judge, and poet Aşık Çelebi. And here how it starts: that who hits his head on the stone after leaving from the heights, who is a crazy lover, is the naked mad Danube. I will continue reading it in Turkish to give a sense of rhyming for you, but you can follow the translation from here. Yarlardan atılıp taşlara vurur başını, aşıkı divane ve mecnunu uğrayandır tuna. Su bulamayınca turulmaz acep müdüre ger, taşı toprak oynar ise dahi oğlandır tuna. Kisveli kafirden iman ehline akıp gelir, kıbleye tutmuş yüzünü bir Müslümandır tuna. Hapsi kafirden boşanmış gibi zencirin sürür, Şah-ı İslam'a gelir bir ehli imandır tuna. Yüz üstüne sürüner gider her hidmetün, bir yumuş oğlanı gibi bende fermandır tuna. Gerçi tonlukla bu şaka soğukluk gösterir, hublar nermeylemekte nar-ı suzandır tuna. Sine ber sine olur simini bedenlere veli, sade pehriye kani pak damardır tuna. In 22 couplets, each of which has a rhyming ending of Danube, or tuna, Aşık uses different metaphor to depict the river, from his chest to a lover, ruler, poet, lunatic, among others. Aşık first personifies the river as a crazy lover running from one corner to another, flowing fast, jumping from the heights, creating the waterfall. The river's energetic movement is then depicted through the imagery of a playful boy. In its orientation in flow, the Danube is further facing the Ottoman Empire as its Qibla, that is the direction of Kaaba that Muslims turn to pray. The direction of the river is thus sacred in running wildly and freely from the infidels to the Sultan's lands, from Germany towards the Ottoman Black Sea, from Christian realms to the Islamic. The change in the river's direction is his conversion, his freedom from slavery. This moving river, free from chains, is now an obedient servant boy to the ruler. He submissively prostrates, lying on the ground on his face in respect, humility, and service under his master's command. Aşık further depicts the river as an enchanting lover and a chaste boy who enjoys naked youths with silver-toned bodies swimming and bathing within him. Aşık's poem strikingly embodies the Danube in male body, as a boy in particular, within the frame of the significance of the river in the early modern Christian, Islamic, Ottoman European rivalry, evoking enslavement, conversion, and abduction of persons and erotics of these practices. The ephemeral, fleeting nature of the boy as a spatial embodiment marks the Danube as the fluid border separating European Christendom from the world of the Ottomans. My use of spatial and space here evokes the critical role of representation in sexing a place. Early modern scholars have uncovered historical processes of gendering and sexualizing spaces such as houses, alehouses, theaters, markets, barbershops, and churches. Exploring gendered conception of territory and territorialized conception of gender, for instance, early modern feminist investigations show that representations of territory as the female body perform the work of gender, to borrow from Louis Montrose, within discourse of discovery, exploration, exploitation, possession, and the use of land. While such studies, including Arizzoli's wonderful talk, reveal the gender dynamics operating in spatial representations within a heterosexual male-female matrix, we see representations in which conversions of persons as well as spaces are gendered male and sexualized as homoerotic, such as Aşık Çelebi's Danube. Aşık is not the only person that embodies this context in the erotic boy. In my talk, I will trace the template of the boy as embodiment of space in Ottoman and European representations in two parts. First, Ottoman representations of Galata, followed by cartographic representations of the Danube in Europe to suggest that certain geographical places of cross-cultural encounters are converted to imaginary thresholds embodied in the beautiful boy, revealing complex geo-erotical politics in the early modern imagination. Part 1. The Boy of Galata. Aşık Çelebi's recasting of the boy as a spatial embodiment stems from the conventional trope of the beautiful Christian boy in early modern Ottoman poetry from the 15th to the 17th century, and this boy is oftentimes from Galata. The Christian boy of Galata not only uncovers the erotic business among elite Istanbulites, as suggested by Walter Andrews and Mehmet Kalpaklı in their Age of Beloveds on early modern Ottoman homoeroticism, but also I propose this boy functions on a representational level in reflecting as well as producing larger spatial political discourses as an embodiment of his native land. Located across the imperial palace, so here, so this is basically the Topkapı Palace, and this neighborhood is Istanbul. This is like historical Istanbul, Muslim neighborhood, and this is Galata neighborhood, and this is the palace. Located across the imperial palace in the historical city of Istanbul, Galata was a town where non-Muslims, mainly Christian and Jewish communities, lived under their own laws and customs after the conquest of the Constantinople by Mehmed II in 1453. As a multicultural quarter of the capital, Galata was particularly significant for the commerce as well as famous for its wineries and taverns. Besides being home to European embassies, some Ottoman elites had villas in Galata for entertainment and social gatherings. Also, some Sufi orders that saw wine and love as a means to unify with the divine were based in this neighborhood. As a place of daily cross-cultural, cross-religious interactions between peoples, Galata was both a metaphoric as well as real space for encountering the other, the exotic. Galata is often represented as a microcosmic Europe at the heart of the empire, a distinctively transgressive yet desirable space inseparable from Istanbul. While 1532 map of Galata by Matrak Canasu represents a poetic world of Galata with its paradisical garden on the background, the poetic language depicting Galata functions like a cartographer's rhetorical device, visualizing and dissecting the place by gazing upon the boy from this space. The poetic boy from Galata generates an erotic game that highlights a masculine imperial desire for political dominions over Christian lands. One example is the Galata poems by the conqueror himself, Mehmed II, who uses the pen name Arni. Here goes one of the poems. A sun-faced angel I saw, the moon of whom is the universe, dark hyacinth curls of whom are sighs of his lovers. An alluring cypress like moon in black dress, lure of whom alone reigns in frank realms. Whoever is not devoted to his girdle knots, no man of faith he is, but a heathen amidst his lovers. His lips give life and eve to those whom his glance kills. The faith, this bestower of life, follows, if any, is the path of Jesus. Do not assume, O Amni, to you that the beauty will submit. You are the Lord of Istanbul. He is the Lord of Galata. The poem starts with the moment when the speaker, Amni, sees the sun-faced angel, who is the source of light for all other beauties of the universe, and whose dark hyacinth curls are swirling, winding like sighs of his lovers. This beautiful beloved boy is the object of his first sight, his dissecting gaze. His beauty is not only the light of this world, as is evident in angels, sun or moon, but also what reigns over the Franks, that is, Euro-Christians. From describing the irresistible and incomparable beauty of the boy, Avni topographically associates the boy with the space he inhabits. The poem zooms in on the boy's religion, his girdle knot that signifies the belt Christians wore in the early modern Galata as a marker of their non-Muslim status. In the poem, the belt is metaphorically a knot of devotion for lovers. Those who are not devoted to the boy's girdle knot are called heathens. This is paradoxical and contradictory with Islamic belief, since if a Muslim is devoted to this girdle knot, he loses his faith because it signifies devotion to Christianity. The beautiful boy further becomes Jesus himself through a reference to Jesus' miracle of bringing back the dead in Islamic Sufi tradition. Like Jesus, the boy's kiss and lips have a life-bestowing, resurrecting, transformative power. The concluding lines, wherein the speaker addresses himself, cycles back to Galata, alluding to an imperial game of domination between the empire and Europe. Avni declares in the last couplet that his boy is the lord of Galata, who would never submit to another lord, including the imperial lord of Istanbul. Using the second person pronoun, Avni reveals his own identity as the ruler of Istanbul, making a connection between himself, the speaker, and the poet Mehmet II. The conclusion, by using a hierarchical ruling reference and separating the two spaces, that's Istanbul and Galata, emphasizes imperial and dominating motives after stating the territorial attachment of the boy to the Christian realm within the imperial capital. The alluring Christian boy of Galata appears in another poem by Mehmet, who this time inscribes Galata upon the body of the beautiful boy. Never would they desire paradise on Galata those who lay eyes but once. Never would they praise a cypress on this pleasing hue those who lay eyes once. I saw a Jesus, Frankish he was to the ears and eyes. Jesus anew would say lips of those who on him lay eyes once. How can they keep their mind and deed, their faith and creed on this Christian, O Muslims, those who lay eyes once? Never would they bethink of Kevser, those who taste the pure wine he drinks. Never would they approach the mosque, those whom his church lay eyes once. All those would know Avni, a heathen he was, on his girdle and cross, those who lay eyes once. Avni from the very beginning creates a dichotomy between Galata and Islamic paradise, that's Firdevs, and positions this space and its inhabitants, the Frankish boy, as superior to the traditional Islamic paradise and its inhabitants. The two contrasted spaces are further gendered. Paradise, or Firdevs, is a female space with Huris, that's woman, and Galata is a male space with boys. Mehmet then blends this space with the boy by suddenly shifting his poetic gaze from Galata towards the boy's adorable body in the rest of the poem. Those who sees his pleasing body would not look for a cypress tree. The poem scripts qualities of Galata upon the boy's body. His body with distinct clothes, looks, and accent becomes a spatial body, which, to use Henry Lefebvre's terms, is a body with gestures, accents, clothing, fashion, and style, thus carrying on its relation with the space. It is called a body so conceived as produced and as the production of a space that is immediately subject to the determinants of that space, unquote. The beautiful boy not only is a product of that space, but also produces that space. Through this transference and extension of the space to the body, he becomes the embodiment of a Euro-Christian space with churches, girdles, cross pendants, wines, and pederastic love, standing in opposition to Islamic paradise. The beautiful boy is further called Jesus again. Those who see him or hear his beautiful voice or his Frangi, European Christian accent, would think he is Jesus himself, or that Jesus the prophet came to life by the kiss of this Jesus the boy from Galata. His beauty, his life-giving lips, and alluring body are all so irresistible that Muslims who see this beautiful boy, his cup, his church, but once, would lose their religion. The last couplet that actualizes this warning, actually actualizes this warning for conversion. In the original Turkish, the line reads, "Bir Frangi kafir olduğun bilirdi Avniya, belini boynunda zünnarı çelipayı gören." So one reading can be that those who see his girdle around his waist and cross on his neck would know he is a Frankish heretic. However, he is the attribution of the girdle and the cross can also be read as attributions of Avni as well. A heathen he was, that is, a heathen Avni was. Considering the lack of gender pronouns in the gender-neutral Turkish language, as well as that Turkish is an inflectional language, the possessive meaning is conveyed through the personal endings that are identical for the second and third personal singulars. It is thus not clear whose waist and neck are referred to here. Whether Avni refers to the girdle and the cross of the boy, who is a heathen, or refers to himself as the direct addressee, wearing the girdle and the cross on his own waist and neck. In the case of addressing himself, Avni seems to have converted in the process of gazing and describing the body of the boy, becoming precisely the Christian heathen he warned about throughout the poem. The conditionality as well as gaze emphasized through repetition of to lay eyes or to gören in Turkish first makes the boy as the object of erotic gaze, next makes Avni as the converted object of this gaze. Avni laid eyes on the boy but once. The boy as the object of gaze, in turn, has become the subject who converts the poet. It is important to note that Mehmet's poetic persona is not only that of a poet, but also of the Sultan of the empire. The two are indistinguishable in both poems. The emperor and the conqueror of the promised city of Constantinople, that goes back to a kind of hadith by Prophet Muhammad, Mehmet as a poet illustrates how he imagines his domination over Christendom by describing it through the body of a European Christian boy. While his poems express a certain degree of anxiety about religious conversion as a result of adoration for a Christian boy, Mehmet's gaze up in Galata, his imagination of this space as embodied in the beautiful boy, is a way of orienting his reader's desire, as well as his own, towards this space and the bodies that inhabit it. In his two poems, the territory and the body thus becomes inseparable. Mehmet's representations of European lands through the beautiful boy becomes a template in the following centuries during the Ottoman expansion further into European territories. Galata plays a central role as a horizon with homoerotic attachments, signifying Europe at home with wine, beautiful boys, bathhouses, and so on. Two examples are suffice to show this. In his 16th century prose work, Description of Istanbul, Latifi writes, "For wine and beautiful boys it is without peer. Every corner of it glows like sunrise with moon-bright faces of European idols, yet its location and its every cranny are superior and preferable to 1,000 European." The poet Revani similarly describes Galata through the beautiful boy and says, "O Sufi, were you to see those frank boys but once, never would you cast an eye on the houris in paradise." The spatial nature of these Galata poems and description of Galata also evinces a political effect of the Ottomans' imperial orientation towards Europe, poetically framed as an orientation towards Galata. Ottoman advancements, particularly from its foundation in 1299 to the early 17th century, was mainly towards the west. In the 16th century, Ottoman armies crossed the Danube, reaching as far as Vienna in Europe. Istanbul was now in the east compared to other western territories under Ottoman rule. While Galata, the west in the east, the Frankistan or Europe in Istanbul, was a space already made a part of home, the Danube was still a threshold in Europe with a potential of conversion. Part 2, The Boy of the Danube. Aşık Çelebi's eroto-imperial gaze in his Ode to the Danube replaces Galata with Danube. The longest river in Europe, running from Black Forest of southern Germany to the Black Sea, was the northern border of the Ottoman presence in Europe for many centuries. It was a space of Ottoman crossings into northern European territories and natural boundary between the Ottoman lands in Europe and Hungary before 1526. Many of the Euro-Ottoman wars took place around this river, and the bordering states were exposed to the Ottoman raids, resulting in a flow of slaves, prisoners, and captives until central Hungary became an Ottoman province in 1541, when Hungarian boys started to be forcibly recruited by Ottomans. Aşık Çelebi's evocation of enslavement, conversion, and boys in his poem in this space evokes this history. Submission of the river is submission of the boys. Writing 2 decades after Aşık Çelebi, Mustafa Ali of Gallipoli, a famous courtier and historian, also recasts boys mentioning the Danube territory. Cataloging servant boys based on their ethnic backgrounds, Ali writes, "The people of Rumelia and the nations of various natural qualities along the shores of the Danube are pure at heart and clean of disposition. In particular, their beardless boys embody the perfection of courtesy, along with their beauty and attractiveness for some 20 years. The appearance of the cheek down and fuzz when their beard begins to grow does not muddy the limpid water of their elegance and delicacy. Their natures are luminous." Rumelia is a reference to the Roman lands, that is, European territories taken by the Ottomans. By privileging Rumelian boys and praising their beauties, Ali evokes the history of Ottoman traffic in boys in European lands and along the shores of the Danube since the mid-15th century. These Rumelian boys of the Danube are idealized for their built bodies as cypresses with fair faces. Ali's praise primarily marks these as the passive subject of sexual relations, as evident in his appraisal of their beardless face that marks their youth and availability. Reflecting on this, early modern European accounts on the Mediterranean traffic portrayed the site as a sexually dangerous one, especially for boys as well. J.M. Gramier reports that the Christian children captured by Mediterranean pirates were sent as presents to Turks or his pashas to satisfy their sodomitical lust for boys. John Ravels narrates tales about captivity of, quote, 100 handsome youths compelled to turn Turks or made subject to more vile prostitution, and all English. John Sanderson reports that a traveler is afraid of his 21-year-old beardless son being captured and sodomized by Turks during their travels into, quote, sodomitical places, unquote. All these accounts describe the Ottomans as sodomized by the means of their treatment of boys, either abducted or to be abducted. They also show concerns about how Ottoman spaces or crossing the Danube make one vulnerable to the abduction as well as sexual use. European cartographic examples also kind of explicitly represent Anglo-Ottoman competitions alongside the banks of Danube through youthful male bodies operating in geopolitical spaces. Included in William Blue's Theatrum Orbis Terrarum, the map Danubius represents the river Danube with the surrounding territories. On the top right-hand side of the map, we see the title Danubius Fluvius Europa Maximus as Danubius Europe's prime river from its source to its end, with all the rivers connecting with it from the both sides. The title is inscribed between two couples. On the left, a European couple, the king holding a sword, and Lady Europe holding a shield with the image of Jesus on the cross. On the right, an Ottoman couple, the Sultan with the turban pointing his sword at the Europeans, while Lady Asia holds an incense burner stepping on the cross. If we accept that the title of the map as representing the map itself, the content of the map, the most important and the largest, the Maximus River of Europe and its surrounding territories, become an object of quarrel, evidenced by the drawn swords between Europeans and the Ottomans. Considering in particular the rivalry between the Ottomans and the Austrian Habsburg for the control of the Danube from the 14th to late 18th century, this image reveals the significance of the river in the political and military struggles in the region. The locations represented in this map are indeed the European Christian territories that were under Ottoman threat, if not already domination. Other 17th century maps of the Danube highlight these conflicts through a cartouche with the emperor and the sultan. In Hondius' map of the river, Maximo Totius Europae Flominus Domini, for example, we see the image of the assertive Hungarian Empire pointing at Maximi, while the Ottoman sultan defensively looks at him. The river itself is the very real border separating the Ottoman realm from the Christendom. These Asian European Islamic Christian binarisms are more evident in Blue's Danube, however, insofar as that the emperor and the sultan are accompanied by female personification of the continents. The emperor in the map is probably the Holy Roman Emperor protecting Europe, while the sultan has Asia on his side. The river in the map, with a cartouche of the river god and boys on the lower left-hand side, becomes an object of continental belonging. Is the river European or Ottoman? Or in between? And what about male bodies on the map? The placement of male bodies on European maps goes back to at least medieval, maps, Theo maps, Mappamundi. As we discussed yesterday, in these maps, each continent sometimes is linked to a son of Noah through inscribed names and visual images. Or Jean Roth's Book of Hagiography, a cartographic text presented to Henry VIII, has no female images but all male embodiments of territories. This competition is sometimes imagined in the frame of sexual aggression, as we can see in frontispiece of Speculum Orbis Terrae by Gérard de Jode, which demonstrate continents in the form of male animals. This time we don't have any female personification. Europe is a horse rearing up in a display of aggressive virility with a charged and muscular body and raised head, while Asia is represented as a feminine camel in a tame posture with submissively lower head and softly curved body lines. Or in Lunet's Of continents, from 1595 in a villa near Verona, America is represented as a half-naked male looking at the half-naked crucified image of Jesus, ready to embrace him. And in Charles Lebrun's La Défense Nations de l'Amérique shows America as an well-proportioned, half-naked masculine man with a confident and commanding look directed outside of the painting. His body is at an arm's length, but the direction of his look does not meet the onlooker's gaze. He becomes an object on the horizon, enticing the viewer's gaze. These representations maintain the classical personification, man as the generic representation of humankind, probably. Yet they also provide us with a picture of an all-male competition between male personified territories, and further gendered and eroticized relations as related to particular spaces represented. Furthermore, many other early modern maps include on their margins naked male bodies such as those of Atlas, putti, cherubim, cubits, and all-male companies. Satyrs, boys, and adult men partake in festivities in some maps such as Friedrich de Witt's, demonstrate how these maps not only are a result of the gaze of the cartographer, but also invite a gaze upon these bodies. Tracing gendered embodiments on early modern maps, Valerie Trapp, in her Mapping the Global Body, a student notes as regards to cartographic bodies that what seems to be a superfluous aesthetic convention conveys a strategy of spatialization that brings significantly new ethnographic, racial, and gendered relations of knowledge into view, unquote. Revealing a universalizing domestic heterosexuality through their placement of male-female pairs on grids, these maps, Trapp suggests, evince the shift in sexual discourse in early modern Europe. Similarly, I suggest, male bodies positioned on maps function not simply as ornamental embellishments, but homoerotic forms of embodiment that associate male bodies with specific spaces. Back to the cartouche. On the bottom left-hand side of the map, positioned above the scale, is the party of the naked man that creates a contrast between the fully dressed Europeans and the Ottomans in the upper right-hand side of the cartouche, as they are symbolically attached to the river and territories represented. The men with beards are of course river gods that were quite popular images in visual representation of spaces and installed in and around Renaissance buildings. As Claudio Lazzaro notes, the discovery of ancient statues of river gods in the 15th century contributed to popularity of the image in fountains, gardens, buildings, festivities, political propaganda, and triumphal entries. They became references to territories ruled and to the alliances between states. She further states the river gods stood for their respective geographical states through their association with symbols and with personifications of cities themselves. Renaissance artists invented the new river god types for local rivers, which allowed them to signify not just aspects of nature that is gendered, animate, abundant, but also particular places and together with other personifications of nature, a region in microcosm. This artistic style was inflected with place. In this particular map, the river gods are accompanied by nude female figures, not by nude female figures, but boys that represent the territory through which the river flows. The river gods are inflected with the Danube. The boys surround them as the embodiment of the territories represented. At the center of the male party bends a youth whose lightly enhanced rear draws the viewer's attention. This particular boy, who we see only from behind, tells the story of the spaces and territorial coral represented above. Water flows from a large container the river gods hold, while the boy at the center holds another container. His rear and the rear of the container are contrasted with the frontal view of the rest of the man. This positioning creates an analogy between the body and vessel. By generating a gaze upon male bodies, the map then objectifies not only the territory, but also the youthful male bodies. As Patricia Rubin posits in her consideration of male buttocks and desirability of beautiful bottoms in visual representations and costume books, buttocks of young men provided striking silhouettes that could capture attention. They act to energize, if not also eroticize, the act of beholding. Here I also want to refer to Ben Schmidt's book, Inventing Exoticism, has a chapter, third chapter I guess, which has 18th century representation of America in the male form seen from the behind, if you want to check out that as well. In this map, it is the boy who eroticized the act of beholding, the bending boy, with particular charm of his body and poses marked as an object of gaze and pleasure. We see a similar imagery of the erotically revealed bottom and the boy with river gods on another map in William Blue's Theatrum Orbis Terrarum as well. The map of the river Rhine, dedicated to Andrea Biccaro. On the bottom right-hand side is a party of naked male men with river gods, boys and Bacchus with a wine cup surrounding the title of the map blended with the territories. The image of Bacchus associates the river with wine while attributing alongside the river gods mythological qualities to the river Rhine. The older accompanied by a young boy, the older man accompanied by a young boy and a man facing them whose deliciously revealed rear attracts the viewer's attention. The young boy accompanying the older man with a crown creates an older man, younger boy coupling. The older man's beard denoting his older age and hierarchical superiority contrasts with the boy's tenderness and secondary position within a master-minion god cupbearer matrix. More strikingly, the muscular rear of the man facing them and the rear of the container are again paralleled in an angle and proximity to the weaver as opposed to the frontal weave of the rest. Having similar territorial imagery, the map of Danube, however, extends the land-boy interrelation by situating the naked male party and the beautiful bottom within the frame of territorial contestation between the Ottomans and Europeans. By centralizing the boy, the map uniquely transforms the aesthetic representations with a mythical imagery into an everyday reality with imperial political conflicts. The boy of the map, the bending bottom, becomes implicated in Euro-Ottoman wars upon the Danube. His body becomes a terrain yet to be charted and dressed by the imperial cartographer as a result of the quarrel between Europe and the Ottomans. From a European perspective, his centrality marks him as the very embodiment of the territory under the drawn swords between the European and the Ottoman. Conclusion. Explaining what was at the issue in discourses concerning the boy's body and boy love in ancient Greece, Michel Foucault notes in the second volume of History of Sexuality that boys were not simply substitutes for women. Among the Greeks, there was a whole moral aesthetics of the boy's body. It told of his personal merit and of that of love one felt for him. Virility as a physical mark should be absent from it, but it should be present as a precocious form and as a promise of future behavior, all ready to conduct oneself as the man one has yet to become. Likewise, the boy as terrestrial metaphor in the representations I have traced is not a substitute for the virgin female territory. While objectified, the boy in these representations points at the promise of virility by actively converting the poet or pouring water to the river. While female personifications of territory, like Lady America, signify gendered forms of possessing and violating a passive land, the boy as terrestrial metaphor highlights the masculine competition between males and the future desire to own the space, which is not virgin. Like the flowing water of Danube or the body of water that separates Galata from Istanbul, the boy in his bending pose or in a beardless, luminous nature is in an ephemeral, fleeting status as an object of voyeuristic pleasure, as well as of future conversion at a transnational space whose character is to be mapped and remapped. The juvenile bodies of boys with peculiar charm mark them as right objects of masculine pleasure, a pleasure of mapping, gaining, and gazing. These boys of Galata and of Danube necessitates an effective distant encounter. They always escape from a touch in the representational spaces through their unrealistic mythical aspects among gods or as Jesus. They are on horizons. They are there in Galata at the banks of the Danube, yet not reachable because they exist only in relation to the weaver's location, desire, and imagination. With their fleeting, energetic, and yet to be adult bodies, spatial boards signify a mutability and difference with an imperial contestation between men. Thank you.